good afternoon. We are back. Another episode of the Brad Michaels Show. This is episode number 2. I'm actually, despite the fact that we got a lot of stuff that has happened that kind of drove me in the direction to do this show again, I'm actually glad that we're back. I think we're actually doing something good, and I think that there's a lot of good that can come out of this show. Victor, good to see you. It was an interesting week for me in Southern California. Not a whole lot going on, and a couple of things outside of my control that created a bit of a trip that was kind of useless.
It's never useless going to California.
That's true. I don't know, but I certainly could have accomplished everything I got done right here back
home.
in the studio and back home. But
Sleeping in your bed.
yeah. Oh, God. I was in an Airbnb, and it was okay, but it's in Long Beach. And Long Beach, I don't know. It's you're from there, though, right? Or just right around Long Beach?
Yeah, right across the bridge.
Wow. Well, Long Beach is certainly not. Now, the harbor area was great.
Yeah,
Love
that's
the
a
harbor
tourist.
area.
That's a tourist area.
But the rest of it,
Yeah, once you get past Ocean Boulevard.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was in an Airbnb that I think the neighbors maybe 4 or 5 houses down on the other side of the street. I think they had a party the two of the nights that I was there. And they had the people were parking on the street. There's street parking anyway, but they were parking in one of the lanes and blocking that off. And it was so bad on Wednesday night that the police were down there going, whoop, whoop, clear your vehicles, get out of here. And I mean, the loud music and people screaming and running up and down the street all night. It was crazy.
I think isn't it spring break time?
Is it spring break? It might
think
be.
it might
I know
be
spring
spring
break
break
comes in around the end of March, first part of April. But anyway, all right. So let's get to a developing story. Putin's military has pushed further into the Ukraine as the humanitarian situation is deteriorating. They are moving west, and I think we've got a map we can throw up on that. I talked about this, and I know we wanted to throw up another map earlier, but I want to pull up the one that has the arrows on it where we think they're going. If you look at the way that it looks like the direction that they're heading in, of course they're going to surround Kiev, and they're coming in from that northeast side. They're coming in from the east side. They're coming in from the south. So they're squeezing it from all of those directions. If you notice that.
Yeah.
Lviv is also right over there where they are headed. They've already been attacking in Lviv. And I think that there's no doubt in my mind that once they can control Kyiv, they'll leave the forces in, whatever forces they have. I mean, I know that the Russian army is in total disarray. If you watch them when a tank gets blown up with one of the Stinger missiles, the rest of the tanks in the formation just kind of go.
Yeah. Morale is down.
Yeah, the morale of the Russian army is totally down. Well, these guys were told that they were going in on some sort of a peacekeeping mission, and then they're in there blowing up women and children, so they can't be too happy about that.
Did you see that? I can't remember who it was, that senator who was reading the text of the dead Russian soldier to his mom.
Oh, no, I didn't.
It's heartbreaking. It's basically saying, hey, Mom, like, I'm not in Russia anymore. I'm in the Ukraine. They told us people would welcome us, but they're not, and we're fighting, and we're just killing. It's just senseless killing, and I'm scared, and I want to go home. And then later he died, and they grabbed his phone, and they read it at the UN. It was it's like just reading him, and it's
well, I hope that the Ukrainian people, hopefully they were able to get his body so that they did, they treated it the way that it should have been treated, because Vladimir Putin, about the incinerators that he has on the battlefield.
Yeah, I mean, and even now, some of the numbers coming out is 7,000 dead Russians in 3 weeks, which is more than we lost in World War II or something like that.
Early on, they had lost more aircraft from missiles being fired at them than I think anybody had ever lost in a war. You had to go back to air-to-air combat before, fighter to fighter shooting each other down before you lose that many aircraft in a war that they had lost already. So not going well for Putin, which that's another reason that I think that we've got a problem here, folks. I think we have a serious problem, and it's being talked about. If he's losing the war, at what point does he feel like he's boxed in? At what point does he feel like he's a cornered cornered and injured animal that's going to potentially push a button.
Yeah, and what does he do when he's cornered? You have to offer him ways out. You have to offer him incentives to leave, because once those disincentives don't work, your options drastically reduce.
Well, and you talk about some of the incentives that I've heard, and I'm not sure, you got to take all this with a bit of a grain of salt, especially when you're talking about a man like Vladimir Putin. We don't know what he's thinking, and we know that he'll lie. But supposedly he said that there would be a compromise, or could be a compromise, and that is a demilitarized Ukraine. Basically what he's looking at is he wants them to be just like the Netherlands and Sweden.
Yeah.
Okay. No threat whatsoever, not a member of NATO. They can only have a small army and a small navy just for self-protection, and that's about it. And I think a small air force. But so they're basically demilitarized, not a member of NATO, and no NATO boots on the ground, and some other concessions. But if you give him those concessions, I mean, is that going to be enough? Is he really going to stop there? We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
Because, according to what I'm looking at on that map is what I've been afraid of the whole time. He gets over there by Lviv, and he's not just having a few small attacks in Lviv, but it's some serious, like an occupation. That's pretty darn close. I'm not sure. Was that about maybe 50 kilometers from the Polish border?
Yeah.
And then you've got other forces coming up out of Crimea that I got a feeling they might be going into Moldova, and then possibly over into Romania. And I know, he has eyes, and we talked about this the last time on the first show. We talked about, his plan basically is to restore the old Soviet Union.
Yep.
He feels it's his destiny. Supposedly, a nearly 2-hour video call between President Biden. We can toss his sleepy mug up there. And President Xi from China. Tensions are running high. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall to hear that conversation. And this brings in, with what Putin is doing, the Chinese have been, in a way, it's been something that I think you can look at it. It might be a positive development. They haven't really said a whole lot. I heard some rumblings that Beijing absolutely was kind of appalled at what they were seeing out of Putin's army in Ukraine and the orders that what these guys are being told to do. Have you heard anything else on that yourself?
Not specifically. Not that. No, I mean it's the China-Russia alliance is kind of like really where we need to keep our eye on.
I think we definitely have to keep our eye on that. It's scary, because if we're going to find out soon, we're going to see what Russia does. Because we unfortunately have a president and an administration, and everybody that's a part of it, they're weak.
Yeah.
You can't have, in times like this, and this is why this is being done. I think that when you look at the withdrawal in Afghanistan and leaving billions of dollars worth of equipment behind, leaving people behind.
Yeah.
We had our own version of the Keystone Cops in our pullout from Afghanistan. It's just horrible. So you turn around and you look at this administration. If you're Vladimir Putin, if you're President Xi from China, you're looking at this guy going, we could do anything to this guy we want. Yeah. And I think that's part of it. They're testing him. North Korea is testing him. North Korea shot off more missiles, I believe, either in January or since January than they've shot in their entire history. Yeah. And you got the Iranians shooting missiles, maybe not targeting our embassy,
but close,
but very, very close, and then coming out and saying, "Yep, we did it."
As payback for something. Yeah.
Payback for something, but who knows?
And then UAE's not even picking up our phone calls.
Yeah. Well, that goes back. I'm telling you, that goes back to the way that they were treated. The OPEC leaders were treated by the Biden administration the Obama administration when Biden was the vice president. Yeah. So,
but also they're trying to broker a deal with the Iranians, proxy through the Russians,
using the Russians.
And the UAE is like, wait, what are we doing here? We're at war with the Iranians.
It's a backdoor deal, just like they're doing with China. It's a backdoor deal to be able to sell their oil and be able to get money transfers.
Yeah, the
and
scary
keep
thing
the
is
economy going.
the scary thing is if the UAE start trading their oil in like a different currency other than American dollars, right? Because right now the majority of the oil that they trade in is in American dollars, and then obviously in other currencies. But if they start trading, say, like in yen, now China's dollar starts to become the leading dollar
Stronger.
of
Well, that's what they want.
the world
They want to
currency.
collapse the dollar because the dollar has always been the mainstay. Everything in the World Bank. If you're buying with the ruble, it gets converted to a dollar, and then it gets converted to the next currency. So even if it's Great Britain was buying something with the British pound, or if it's euros, whatever it is, it goes from rubles to dollar, and then from dollar to pound or to euro, and vice versa. The dollar was always involved in the middle of the transaction. What they've wanted to do for years, and one of the reasons why a lot of us have been saying, get yourselves invested into gold and silver, is because if they do what they want to do, which is it's just going to be a direct trade, ruble to yuan, euro to ruble, euro to dollar, whatever, then your currency, I don't even know what that's going to do to currency markets around the world.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I don't want to get involved in, kind of is currencies, although I have a great opportunity to get involved in currencies, and that's something we may have eventually as a topic on the show, and also a potential sponsor, but we'll have to talk about that later. So I don't know, the whole situation right now in Ukraine, hats off, thumbs up to the Ukrainian people and President Zelensky. They are giving Russia one heck of a fight. I think we're 3+ weeks, going on a month now. This is something I don't think any of us saw this coming.
It was a miscalculation for sure on
Well,
Putin's behalf.
You're looking at and you're seeing it play out. Unfortunately, we're watching a lot of death and destruction. But you're also seeing what's playing out is you're seeing a military that's just not very well trained, and their equipment is actually very subpar. And then because they're not trained and because they don't know what they were going in there for, they were told one thing and now they're in there just killing women and children. So the demoralization of the Russian army is playing a big role in this.
Yeah.
A lot of them, from what I've understood, have walked up to Ukrainian citizens and just given themselves up.
Yeah, a lot. There's now granted, you don't know what's really coming out of that area, but a lot of videos showing Russians just leaving the tanks just in the middle of the street. Saying,
well, they've been freezing to death in the tanks.
Yep.
And they're starving to death. They don't have food.
Well, they're old Soviet tanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're old Soviet tanks.
Yeah. No heaters. So, well, you know what? The whole thing that this brings us to, and I found this interesting, and I had to talk about this because we talk about oil and gas, and we've talked about gas prices because of this situation. And I'm sorry, yes, your gas prices at the pumps, they're going up right now because of this, but they were going up a long time before this. We know that inflation at 40-year high. Gas prices were already going up long before Putin even started to amass troops at the Ukrainian border. So the Obama administration and Elizabeth Warren and Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris, every one of them, Adam Schiff, they all want to come out and they all want to talk to you and try to tell you. And they're even using TikTok stars. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
18, 19, and 20-year-old TikTok stars to come out and tell you why gas is expensive. Give me a break. Gas is expensive because Joe Biden campaigned and said he was going to destroy the fossil fuel industry. If they were doing it, they were going to get shut down, and we're not going to have it anymore. He said that, and we don't have it. We'll see if we can pull that video. We got to pull that video up, see if we can get that up there.
Would you close down the
By
oil
the way, I would
industry?
transition from the oil industry, yes.
Oh,
I would
that's
transition.
a big statement.
It is a big statement
That's a big
because
statement.
I would stop
Why would you do that?
because the oil industry pollutes significantly.
I see.
Here's the deal, but
That's
you
a
can't
big
do that.
statement.
Well, if you let me finish the statement, because it has to be replaced by renewable energy over time, and I'd stop giving to the oil industry. I'd stop giving them federal subsidies.
We are going to get rid of fossil fuels. They want to do the same thing I want to do. They want to phase out fossil fuels, and we're going to phase out fossil fuels.
He said in the campaign, and it was actually in a debate. The first time he said it was in a debate with Bernie Sanders. I'm going to basically, without, I mean, it wasn't the exact words. We'll pull that up. He said, I'm going to destroy the fossil fuel industry. First day in office, boom, here goes the Keystone Pipeline, shuts that down. Thousands of workers out of work. That hurts the economy. We're dependent again on foreign oil. So I found this interesting when I had a friend of mine has sent this to me, and I don't remember. I think I remember seeing this at one time, but I didn't pay that much attention to it. And I think now we need to shed some light on it. It's a great story. It's called The Night Watchman is what it was called. And it was once upon a time the government had a vast scrapyard in the middle of a desert. And Congress said someone may steal that or steal from that at night. So they created a night watchman position, and then they hired a night watchman. And then Congress said, well, how does the watchman do his job without instructions? So they created a planning department and hired two people, one person to write the instructions and another person to do some time studies. Then Congress said, how will we know the night watchman is doing the task correctly? So they created a quality control department and they hired two people. One was to do the studies and one was to write the reports. Then Congress said, this gets so funny at this point because this is Congress in action for you. How are these people going to get paid? So they created two positions, a timekeeper and a payroll officer, and then hired two people. Then Congress said, well, who's going to be accountable for all of these people? So they created an administrative section, hired three people, an administrative officer, assistant administrative officer, and a legal secretary. Then they said, we have had this command in operation for 1 year. We're $918,000 over budget. We got to cut back. So they laid off the night watchman. So that's exactly them. Now, here we go, though, folks. We're quietly, and we do this all the time, and there's a small group, and I realized this morning when I saw a post, or I saw a poll, and it asked people that were in this poll how they described themselves politically, whether they were conservative, kind of in the middle, or if they were liberal. 40% said absolutely conservative. 20% said liberal. And another 40% considered themselves Democrat. We're being controlled. Or no, 40%, I'm sorry, 40% were in the middle. So you have 40% in the middle, 40% said they were definitely Republican, and 20% liberal. But if you look at a lot of the policies that dictate what happened, what is set down from Congress, what the Democrats do to get their control, we have 20% liberal population controlling about 80% of the country. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I find that interesting because we have such a small minority that if they don't get their way, they hold what we just witnessed in a 4-year temper, actually almost a 5-year temper tantrum and counting, because they're still having their temper tantrum over Donald Trump. If they don't get their way, they act like 3-year-olds have a temper tantrum. It's pathetic. But let's get on. Folks, just quietly let this sink in, okay, what I'm talking about, because quietly we end up going like sheep to slaughter, okay? Does anybody remember the reason given for the establishment of the Department of Energy? Do you?
No.
All right. So during the Carter administration, bottom line is we've spent several hundred billions of dollars in support of an agency, the Department of Energy, and the reason for which most people that are watching right now have no idea what I'm even talking about. They don't even remember why we started the Department of Energy. So you ready for this? It was very simple. And at the time, everybody thought that it was a great idea, and it was very appropriate, and it was. The Department of Energy was instituted on August 4th, 1977, to lessen our dependence on foreign oil. And now it's 2022, almost 45 years later, And the budget for this necessary department, any guess?
A whole lot of money.
$242 billion a year. It has, let's break down the numbers for you guys. It has 16,000 federal employees, and it has approximately 100,000 contract employees or contractors. And look at the job that it's done. All right. I mean, this is where you basically slap yourself in the forehead, and you think about what is going on? What is going on with all this money? What are we doing? 45 years ago, 30% of our oil consumption was from foreign imports. Today, 70% of our oil consumption is foreign imports. And now think about it. We've turned over our banking system. We've turned over healthcare, and we turned over the auto industry to the same government. I don't know. What could possibly go wrong? All right, let's talk about U.S. oil independence. Folks, we've got it. We could do it. About 6 months ago, there was a news program on oil. One of the Forbes brothers was a guest, and the host asked, I'm going to ask you a direct question. I'd like a direct answer. How much oil does the U.S. have in the ground? Forbes didn't miss a beat. He said more than all the Middle East put together. The U.S. Geological Service issued a report in April 2008 that only scientists and oil men knew was coming, but man, was it big. It was a revised report, hadn't been updated since 1995, on how much oil was in this area of the western two-thirds of North Dakota, western South Dakota, and extreme eastern Montana. And we're talking about the Bakken. So if you look at this map on the Bakken, this is the size of this oil area. And that's a vast area. So you're talking about from the eastern side of Montana, pretty much almost all of South Dakota, or actually half of South Dakota and most of North Dakota. And then it also, what we're showing on the map here is the part that gets to the border in Canada. But there's more of it that goes into the Canadian territory. So let me explain a little bit more about the Bakken. It is the largest domestic oil discovery since Alaska's Prudhoe Bay. It has the potential to eliminate all American independence on foreign oil. The Energy Information Administration, or the EIA, it estimates it at 503 billion barrels of oil. Now, even if just 10% of that oil is recoverable, 5 billion barrels at $107 a barrel. We hit 109, I think, the other day. We're looking at a resource that's worth more than $5.3 trillion. That's just if 10% is recoverable. It's a formation known as the Williston Basin. It's more commonly referred to, though, as the Bakken. And as you notice there, it stretches, as I said, it stretches from northern Montana through North Dakota into Canada. For years, U.S. oil exploration has been considered a dead end. Even the big oil companies had given up searching for major oil wells decades ago. But a recent technological breakthrough has opened up the Bakken's massive reserves, and now we have access to this up to 500 billion barrels. And because this is light, sweet crude oil, those billions of barrels will cost Americans just $16 a barrel. Now, can you imagine, when we get down to some of these other numbers, how much money the United States could make from selling this oil to the rest of the world? Because there's so much oil, there's nothing funny. That's enough crude oil to fully fuel the American economy for 2,041 years straight. The world's not going to be around for another 2,000 years. And if that didn't throw you on the floor, then this next one should, because this is from 2006. U.S. oil discovery, largest reserve in the world, Stansberry report online, 420. Maybe they were smoking something. I don't know.
Amen.
But this came out on 4/20/2006. Hidden 1,000 feet beneath the surface of the Rocky Mountains lies the largest untapped oil reserve in the world. It is more than 2 trillion barrels. On August 8th, 2005, then President Bush mandated its extraction. But in many recent years of high oil prices, nothing's been extracted. When the president mandates that we go and extract this, who's standing in the way of getting that job done? Why are we still fighting with all of this? Why are we still fighting over offshore drilling? Okay. So they reported this stunning news. We have more oil inside our borders than all the other proven reserves on Earth. And here's the official estimates, and we'll throw these up on the board here. We have 8 times with this oil, these 2 reserves. We have 8 times as much oil as Saudi Arabia, 18 times as much oil as Iraq, 21 times as much as Kuwait, 22 times more oil than Iran. And you ready for this one? 500 times more oil as Yemen. And it's all right here, folks, right here in the western United States. Victor?
It's just I just see dollar signs. You know how much money we can make? Like, you know, like even if you take that money and just put it towards like these giant bills, you know, like all this can reduce inflation. All of this can reduce the gas price. All of this can
Pay off the national debt.
pay off the national debt.
Make our gas prices at the pump 39 cents a gallon.
Yeah. And it sucks because it's all for a stupid green agenda.
Well, and we're going to get into the new Green Deal. But folks, I'm telling you something. If you don't pass this along, if you're watching this show right now and you don't pass this information along, the next time that you complain about gas prices, and by doing nothing, you don't have anything. You forfeit your right to complain.
Gas is at $5.20 right now here in Vegas.
Yeah, I just paid, and as a matter of fact, I was shocked. Now I got outside of, I went to Hysteria. Is that
Hesperia?
Hesperia? That was it. Hysteria. That fits better. I like that. Hesperia, I stopped to gas up, and I was able to get gas, believe it or not, 91 octane in California, $5.55 a gallon.
Crazy.
So that wasn't bad. Well, I was expecting $7.55 or worse.
Yeah, go to the city. That's where they'll be.
Yeah, I'm sure. So I want to talk about just a little bit. And actually, you know what, Victor? Should I talk about them profiting first?
Let's do that.
Let's do that because I think that makes more sense. So what I want to do is I want to talk, and Jesse Waters, thank you, Jesse. He got me going on this because he started talking about it last week. And then he said all of this week he was going to talk about it even more. And I ended up on my trip in California. I didn't get a chance really to listen to too much of what he was talking about, but I did some research and I found out that there are 22 Democrats. Now there's also some Republicans that have done some profiteering as well, but there are 22 Democrats that I found that are hailed as environmental champions. And they have personally pumped money into oil companies that rely on fossil fuels. And they've also invested in some other companies as well, energy companies and things like that. These are Democrats who have key roles shaping energy policy, also investing in energy companies. They've reported holdings on trading shares of ExxonMobil, Dominion Energy, and Chevron, among others. And these are lawmakers that often get accolades for their voting records on green issues. So let's dive into this. So as nearly 24 lawmakers getting gold star ratings from major environmental advocacy groups. They have personal financial ties to fossil fuels and fossil fuel giants, petroleum-based and petroleum-focused energy companies, according to federal financial disclosure documents. Now, the documents that we were able to obtain to get this information, this was documents that were filed in regards to their 2021 investments. But we also found out that many of these and some others also were investing in oil companies, drilling companies, and other energy companies as late as the middle of February, about 2 weeks before Putin decided to cross the border. Several of these lawmakers wield some very powerful committees. They're over some very powerful committees, including the House Appropriations Committee's Energy or Environmental Related Subcommittees. There's 3 members on that. Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, 2. The Senate Committee on Environmental and Public Works, 1. And the House Natural Resources Committee, 1. Jesse Waters was talking to Karl Rove, and one of the guys that they brought up is the first guy on my list, Senator John Hickenlooper from Colorado. Now, he serves on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and he has reported owning up to $500,000 worth of Duke Energy. That's a stock. He had that in 2020. He sold up to $250,000 worth of Chevron stock in late October of 2021, and then he reported up to $1 million in capital gains from ExxonMobil stock that he no longer owns. Senator Tom Carper of Delaware, who serves as chairman of the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works, he reported owning up to $80,000 worth of energy-related stocks, up to $50,000 worth of Duke Energy, there's that company again, and up to $15,000 worth of Shell and $15,000 worth of Chevron that he attributed to his wife. Okay, in 2020, chicken-eating Representative Steve Cohen of Tennessee, who can forget that, chicken eater in chief, who serves on the Natural Resources Committee, he reported owning up to $100,000 worth of energy-related stocks, up to $50,000 worth of Chevron, and up to $50,000 worth of ExxonMobil. Representative Lois Frankel from Florida. She serves on the House Appropriations Subcommittee governing energy and water. She reported owning up to $45,000 in energy-related stocks, up to $15,000 worth of ExxonMobil, up to $15,000 worth of Dominion, and then up to $15,000 worth of ConocoPhillips. She has continued this year to trade in oil investments. And like most of Congress, Carper and Frankel have not established a qualified blind trust. That was a congressionally approved and independently managed financial vehicle that the Senate Select Committee on Ethics describes as the most comprehensive approach to eliminate conflicts of interest and the appearance of them, but can be expensive and initially time-consuming to establish. But they got to do something. You can't keep profiting on this stuff. Now, I'm going to come out here to my home state where I live, Representative Susie Lee, Democrat. She serves on the House Appropriations Subcommittee that controls federal spending on environmental matters, and she has reported owning up to $100,000 of Dominion stock. She's also among 57 members of Congress, and I think I'm going to read off the list. Maybe we'll even scroll the list later if we can. There's 57 members of Congress that Insider and other media organizations identified as having violated the disclosure provisions of the federal Stop Trading on Congressional Knowledge Act of 2012. It was a law that was designed to promote transparency and defend against financial conflicts of interest among top government officials. Let's go into some of the legacy stockholders. This is a little different. In a few cases, the Democrats pinned their association with energy companies on deceased family members, like Representative Marcy Kaptur. She's a Democrat whose Ohio district snakes along nearly 150 miles of Lake Erie shoreline. She's the chairwoman of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Energy and Water Development. She has reported owning up to $100,000 worth of stock in Nutrien. That's a Canadian fertilizer company. In her most recent annual financial filing, she showed that, and she said that she had reported owning up to $100,000 worth of stock in Nutrien. That's a Canadian fertilizer company. In her most recent annual financial filing, Lake Erie for years has experienced algae bloom caused in part by fertilizer runoff. So she's invested in a company that causes a major problem, and And she's claiming that she owns that stock because she inherited it in December of 2020 from her brother who had passed away. She does not intend to trade or cash out her deceased brother's gift because the inherited shares are the first she's ever owned during her service. She will look at various options as she resolves the estate. Can't make this stuff up. Can you? Representative Mary Gay Scanlon of Pennsylvania, she's another legacy stockholder. She reported owning up to $50,000 worth of Exelon stock that's been in the family for decades. A Scanlon staffer told Insider that her husband, Mark Stewart, who's an attorney, got 25 shares of the Philadelphia Electric Company nearly 50 years ago from an uncle who worked there at the time. The aide said Stewart held on to the stock as times have changed, and Exelon absorbed PECO in 2000, but Scanlon has never been involved in that particular investment. All right, yeah. And this is just a handful. There were other politicians, and Jesse Waters, you guys would have to go check on Fox News and watch what he talked about. There were so many others that were profiting. They were buying, they were profiting to the tune of 40 and 60% profits at the end of last week on investments that they had purchased back in January and February. And Karl Rove said, unfortunately, there's nothing against it, but it should just be something that, here's the only way we're ever going to get politicians to stop taking advantage of those positions is to stop paying politicians to go to Washington. Or pay them peanuts. They just had, I want to bring this up, and I don't want to bring up anything about Surfside. It was a horrible accident. It was a horrible disaster when that building collapsed down there in Surfside. But I just found out pretty much a lot of the Surfside City Council was replaced. I think they have 3 new council members. They have a new mayor. And I found out that there was another provision on the ballot that the voters turned down, and it was to go ahead and let the city council members, instead of earning $1 free per year to be on the city council, they were going to earn $12,000, and the voters said no. That's the way it should be. Yep. All right. If you want to be a senator, you want to be a congressman or woman, fine, go ahead. Go to Washington, go to your state, be a councilwoman in your local city government or your county government. Go ahead, become a politician. Serve the people because that's what you're supposed to do, but you ain't going over there and getting any more than $12. You get $1,000 a month. Period. They don't go and do anything anyway. Half the time, if you go to Congress, if you go to the Capitol and you walk in there on any given day, they're not in session. How often do we actually see them in session? I mean, half the time they're on some sort of a month-long furlong, they're furlough. They're gone. They're not there. They show up just to vote, and sometimes, I mean, if you were Barack Obama, you just showed up as, you weren't even there, or you showed up as present, and then you got up and left. These people were absolutely ridiculous. You know what? I'll come back to the 57 members, and maybe we'll talk about them later. But I want to talk about their hypocrisy, because they're telling you to go out and buy an electric vehicle. They're telling you that we got to pass the Green New Deal, right? This is what they've been doing. An electric vehicle, let's think about this. And this was, I got to thank a friend of mine for bringing this to my attention. I thought this was great. What is a battery? And I think Tesla said it best when he called it an energy storage system. Now, I don't know who wrote this. Whoever wrote this has to either be in the industry, has to be in the fossil fuels industry, or is a engineer, something. So I'd like to know who wrote this. I saw this posted by a friend of mine on Facebook, and I had to share this with you because this shows you everything they're trying to do. They're trying to eat their cake, or have their cake and eat it too. All right. So Tesla said it best when he called a battery an energy storage system. They do not make electricity. They store electricity that's produced somewhere else, primarily by coal, uranium, natural gas-powered plants, or diesel-fueled generators. So to say that an EV or an electric vehicle is a zero-emission vehicle for all of the bleeding heart global warming alarmists, all right, that's not valid one bit. Since 40% of the electricity generated in the U.S. is from coal-fired plants, it follows that 40% of the electric vehicles on the road are coal-powered, if you think about it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Einstein's formula, E equals MC squared, tells us it takes the same amount of energy to move a 5,000-pound gasoline-driven automobile a mile as it does to move an electric one. The only question, again, is what produces the power. To reiterate, it does not come from the battery. The battery is only a storage device. It's just like a gas tank in your car. The gas tank isn't providing the energy to move the car. It's just storing the gasoline that then combusts in the engine. Now, there's two orders of batteries. There's the rechargeable, and then there's single use. Most common single-use batteries are your A, your AA, AAA, C, D, your 9.5, your 9-volt batteries, and then the lantern types. These are dry cell species. They use zinc, manganese, lithium, silver oxide, or zinc and carbon to store electricity, chemically, and they all contain toxic heavy metals. Then you got your rechargeable batteries, and they only differ in their internal materials. And I'm probably going to screw up some of these because I don't remember chemistry, and I don't remember all of my minerals and my metals, so bear with me. But in your rechargeable batteries, lithium ion, nickel metal oxide, nickel cadmium. The United States uses 3 billion of these two battery types a year. 3 billion. Most are not recycled, and they end up in landfills. California is the only state which requires that all batteries be recycled. Now, if you throw your small used batteries in the trash, here's what happens to them. Because batteries are self-discharging. That means that even when they're not in use, they leak tiny amounts of energy. And you have likely ruined a couple of flashlights. I know I have. If you keep your old batteries in a flashlight, how many times have you opened up an old flashlight and you see this slimy, reddish, orangish, rust-looking type of liquid, and it's all over the coil spring on the bottom. It's your negative side. It's all over your electrode, your positive electrode at the top. When a toy runs down and can no longer power a toy or a light. You think of that battery as dead. It's not. It continues to leak small amounts of electricity, and as the chemicals inside it run out, the pressure builds inside the battery. That's what causes the battery's casing. It's a metal casing, and eventually it cracks. The metals left inside then ooze out. They liquefy and they ooze out. The ooze in your ruined flashlight is toxic. And I remember as a kid, and probably all kids have done this. I don't know. Most kids have probably done this. You're going to experiment with, what's that taste like? Mm-hmm. All right. We were kids. We didn't know any better. We ate dirt. I drank out of a garden hose. Did you ever drink out of a garden hose?
No, but I was a city kid, so we never really had a garden hose. We were just in LA, so we, in a little apartment. So I was a city kid.
Well, so the ooze that's running out of your battery in your flashlight, when you throw that into the landfill, it's going to run out into the landfill too. So what happens is all batteries, eventually they rupture because it just takes rechargeable batteries longer. And that's where they end up in the landfill. In addition to dry cell batteries, there's also wet cell batteries. Those are used in your automobiles, your boats, motorcycles. And a good thing about those is 90% of them are recycled. Because if you remember, if you go to Sears, you go anywhere else to have them. Sears is probably going to be closed. That's probably not a good. You go to your mechanic. You
AutoZone, O'Reilly.
AutoZone, O'Reilly.
Auto Parts.
You have to give them what they call give us the core. When you buy a new battery, there's a core fee. That's recycling it. And then it's taken to a proper place where they're recycled, they're cleaned out, and then they're able to use the outer casing again and melt down some of the metals that are still usable. But anyway, so a lot of times they're recycled. Now, unfortunately, they don't have any way yet, or they haven't figured out how to recycle single-use batteries, the smaller ones. But that's not the half of it. Okay, and this goes on a little bit longer, but this is extremely important because as you're seeing, in order to get the green new energy that they're talking about, we're going to have to use the fossil fuels to do it. So for all of those of you that are excited about your electric cars and your green revolution, all right, let's take a closer look at batteries. And then we're going to also look at windmills and we're going to look at solar panels. These three technologies share what we call environmentally destructive embedded costs. Everything manufactured has two costs associated with it. You have your embedded cost and your operating costs. I'll explain the embedded cost using a can of baked beans as my subject. And in this scenario, baked beans are on sale. So you jump in your car and you head out to the grocery store. Sure enough, they're on the shelf, $1.75 a can. So as you head to the checkout, you begin to think about the embedded cost in the can of beans, or at least I do. So the first cost is the diesel fuel the farmer used to plow the field, till the ground, harvest the beans, transport them to the food processor. Not only is his diesel fuel an embedded cost, so are the cost to build the tractors, the combines, the trucks. In addition, the farmer might use a nitrogen fertilizer made from natural gas. Next is the energy cost of cooking the beans, heating the building, transporting the workers, paying for the vast amounts of electricity used to run the plant, the steel can holding the beans, that also comes with an embedded cost. Making the steel can requires mining tassonite, shipping it by boat, extracting the iron, placing it in a coal-fired blast furnace, and adding carbon. Then it's back on another truck to take the beans to the grocery store. And finally, you add in the cost of the gasoline for your car to go back and forth to the store. A typical EV or electric vehicle battery weighs 1,000 pounds. It's about the size of a travel trunk. It contains 25 pounds of lithium, 60 pounds of nickel, 44 pounds of manganese, 30 pounds of cobalt, 200 pounds of copper, 400 pounds of aluminum, steel, and plastic. And inside are over 6,000 individual lithium-ion cells. It should concern you that all of those toxic components come from mining. For instance, to manufacture each EV auto battery, you must process 25,000 pounds of brine for the lithium, 30,000 pounds of ore for the cobalt, 5,000 pounds of ore for the nickel, 25,000 pounds of ore for copper. All told, you dig up 500,000 pounds of Earth's crust for just one battery. What are you thinking so far, Victor? I see you over there shaking your head. Told you I was going to hit him.
Yeah, it's crazy when you really think about like what it is, because it's kind of like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. You know, like, hey, look, it looks like it's okay. You know, the bleeding has stopped, but in reality, like the bullet's still inside. You got to pull it out. You got to do all this other stuff that's creating all this other damage. And you know, there's like it's a necessary evil, right? Like, at what point do we say, hey, this is not worth it, right? Obviously, in a utopian world, it'll be nice that we don't have to do this, you know. And there's other ways around it, which the green people are against, say like nuclear energy, right? Nuclear energy is one of the cleanest forms of energy. But, you know, and I was listening to a podcast about it. Nuclear energy is so efficient that you can store the amount of nuclear radioactive material per person's lifetime in a can of soda. So literally a 12-ounce Coke can is how much energy you will use as a person of nuclear energy, and all that has to do is be stored. So let's say you take a can of Coke and then you put it in a football field, and then you stack it up 100 high and all the way down to the football field, that's enough storage for a lot of people. I don't know the exact number. So there's ways to store it. Unfortunately, there's no ways to dispose of it, but there's ways to store it. But everybody gets scared and thinks about Chernobyl and thinks about, obviously, Japan. The issue is that Ukraine doesn't have an OSHA. You ever dealt with OSHA? I used to work. I used to go to mining fields and
Well, I was former Navy. I had to deal with OSHA all the time.
Those are some MFers. So, they don't have an OSHA. They don't have safety regulations. They don't have oversight committees and these overpaid bureaucrats that can oversee, make sure that it's good and that we don't have a Godzilla event, but they're going for like the path of least resistance. Put a nice little solar panel or windmill and think that this is like, this is green energy.
And we're going to get to those in a minute.
This is free energy.
Yeah.
It's not free energy.
No.
It's not. You're just...
How do you manufacture the solar panels? How do you manufacture the windmills?
And it's the same thing. It's absolutely like so deceiving. It's like the one example I always use is, when you see a McDonald's truck and it says on the side of the McDonald's truck, like the semis, it says 100% beef.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And obviously we know it's not 100% beef.
No.
Like we're thinking, how are you saying that it's 100% beef? That's because the name of the company that manufactures the beef is 100. It's called 100% beef. It's the name of the company that processes the meat. So it's a 100% beef patty from the company named 100% beef.
Wow.
You know what it's like?
Yeah. It's definitely, and like you said earlier, it's like putting you're putting a Band-Aid on something that probably needs a tourniquet, really. And that's the reason why I wanted to expose this. I thought that this was great, seeing all this information coming out from my friends. I wanted to expose this. I knew this was going on, and I kept thinking, how do you really explain to those? And I know there's probably not a single liberal, tree hugger, bear hugger, whatever you want to call, listening or watching this show, but hopefully at some point, somebody who is watching or listening to this show will hug one of their tree hugger friends and say, listen, I got to tell you something. You need to understand this.
That goes back to like that whole like Thanksgiving dinner paradox, right? Like everybody has that uncle in Thanksgiving dinner who voted for Trump, and you have these crazy, like, well, like true, like, I'm the uncle at the party who's in the corner, in the corner eating my tacos, talking about like all these political issues, and everybody's looking at me like I'm crazy. But it's like, no, like, but it's funny because now my whole family's starting to realize, like, yo, like this is kind of,
maybe Victor actually,
maybe he wasn't wrong.
What he's talking about.
It's funny because my brother used to, like, when Trump was president, he'll say, Trump this, Trump that, Trump this, Trump that, and I'm like, yo, but like, explain to me why.
Yeah.
And he'd just be like, oh, because he said this. Okay, but what has he done? And he'll brush me off.
Yeah.
It's been 3 years since we had those conversations. Now he's like, yo, like they stole the election. Like this is crazy.
They're starting to get it.
It's like you're really starting to like see, like, open
the
their
woke
eyes.
crowd is actually now starting to actually wake up.
Exactly. Like the real wokeness.
Wokeness,
and like, going back to the Thanksgiving dinner, like maybe those people aren't too bad. Like maybe you should really have these conversations. Maybe you shouldn't go to blows at it. But maybe you should sit down.
There was no reason to ever go to blows, but that's how crazy they get.
But you should sit down and talk about it. Sit down and talk about, like, hey, I understand. And the shit that, excuse me, I didn't mean to cuss, but the thing that pisses me off about the left so much is that they're using, like, it comes from a good place, right? Like, obviously.
It does.
Like, with anything. Like, when you come to, like, immigration or gun control or the environment, like, it comes from a good place. Yeah. But what happens now that it comes from a good place is now they can throw it over your head and say, hey, if you're against this, that means you're an evil person.
Exactly.
And you're not for
They try to beat you over the head with it.
Oh, you don't want our kids to live in a nice, like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that the economic repercussions of going green, going 100% green, 0% carbon, is going to cost so much more.
Well, and from what I just exposed about our politicians investing in fossil fuels and energy anyway, shows that they know that it's not even possible.
It's not possible. It's not possible. But we want to appease a Swedish teenager who's yelling at the adults.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not how this works. And like, even now, like what's happening now in Ukraine is a direct repercussion of going green.
Yeah.
Germany tried to go green way more than we did, right?
And it didn't work.
And what they did is they said, hey, we're going to build these solar panels, but on the back end, we're going to buy our oil from Russia. right? So 50%, 40 or 50% of the energy consumption from Germany came from Russia.
Well, and you just brought up an interesting point because they said that they were going to go ahead and buy all their oil and gas from Russia.
Yep.
Which, look at what we're doing. We've just said how much oil we have. We already know we've got plenty in reserves. We just said exactly how much.
Yeah.
And if we would just tapped 10% of it, okay, we would have complete energy independence. And yet the Democrats are still hell-bent on shutting off those spigots and buying oil and gas from Russia until they finally had to stop buying it from Russia because of what's going on.
So where do they go? Venezuela.
Now they go to Venezuela.
Maduro.
They were begging OPEC, and OPEC wouldn't even answer.
Yeah, and the Saudis didn't answer. UAE didn't answer. But it's crazy because like think about Venezuela. Venezuela is like crazy rich in natural resources.
Yeah.
Like that they can be a major player in the world politics. But you have a communist dictator named Maduro who completely turned that country to dookie.
Well, he had a little help from another guy named Chavez.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, of course. But currently it's Maduro, and he's a dictator who literally, if you like, where has communism worked?
Nowhere.
Where has it worked? And it's like just
But they're hell bent to keep
hell
trying
bent
it.
to keep trying it.
That's
Because
the definition of insanity. Though.
yeah. But what do they always say? That's because it didn't work because I wasn't in charge.
I wasn't in charge.
How
of it, or we were in
arrogant
charge.
is that?
Well, and that's our. Folks, I'm sorry, but hey, you know what? I believe it was my XO when I was in the Navy. For those of you that don't know, that's the executive officer at your command or on your ship. So you have your CO, your commanding officer. Second in charge is the XO or the executive officer. I think it was my XO said, and I'll say this about Democrats, okay? They're never going to change. That's why we talk about having rhinos, Republicans in name only. Okay, he said, I want you to remember something, and this will help you out throughout your life. If it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. That's a Democrat for you. They're going to do the same thing over and over and over again, but you got to remember something else. Victor, you'll agree with me on this one. What are they? Most of them are attorneys. Might have been a good attorney for the most part. They didn't really do all that good in private practice. Most of them come out of public defender's office or the DA's office and decide to become a politician. Most of them are actually failed attorneys, to be honest with you. And then they think it's their job to go to Congress and write law. And they're criminals. They're just legalized criminals because they got elected. You elected them to go to Washington and criminally torture you. They're assaulting you every single day. And you let them do it when you reelect them. And you reelect them because you are doing definition of insanity. Repeating the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results. Does anybody ever really think that Nancy Pelosi is going to follow through on any of her promises? Or Maxine Waters, or Adam Schiff, or Chuck Schumer, or any of them? No. And I just showed you they're profiting off of you. They're profiting off of your backs. They're making you go out there and go to work. They don't work. Do you think being in Congress, being a congressman or woman, or being a senator is an actual job? Give me a break. We got to start telling these people, no, you don't go to Congress and make over $200,000 a year. Or even, $260 as a senator, $235 as a congressman or woman. And then if you're like the leaders, you get even more, like $40,000 or something. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. I used to know it. It doesn't matter to me. It's $200,000 more than they should be making. I'll tell you that much. They should go to Washington. You should make $12,000 as a congressman or woman, $15,000 if you're speaker. Okay. You shouldn't be allowed to invest in anything while you're there, and you should have a term limit. And then when your term is over, get the heck out of here and go home. Then you can go ahead and invest in stuff, because then you're not getting insider information, and you weren't able to use.
It's still sticky though, because you have friends that are still in thing. But like you're right. Yeah, sure. A politician does their but it's like, okay, like take Hillary Clinton. She did her thing as a politician, and now these big banks are paying $500,000 for her to talk for an hour.
You heard that the Clinton administration or the Clinton Foundation got started up again, right? Now they're raising money for Ukraine.
Yeah.
It ain't going to Ukraine, folks.
No.
I'll show you exactly where it's going.
It's going to pay the
Right in their
hitman
pocket.
that took out Epstein. That's where it's going.
Epstein didn't hang himself. All right, let me get. You know what? We could talk about this, and we will. We will be talking about this ad infinitum. It's just. I want people that. There's a lot of people, and I know there's a lot of people now that are on the cusp of realizing, as we said, the woke are actually really waking up and realizing, hey, they're just now realizing that they're building that little fence around them and they're boxing them in. And hopefully before we get completely captured, like the wild pig and the farmer, hopefully it's not going to happen. But I want to talk about, let's get back to talking about the natural resources that it takes to build batteries, to build the solar panels, to build the windmills used for the wind power. 68% of the world's cobalt. It's a significant part of a battery. That comes from the Congo. Their mines have no pollution controls. And as you mentioned earlier, they employ children who die from handling all of this toxic material. So should we factor in these diseased kids as part of the cost of driving an electric car? Sorry, for those of you that love your electric cars, and don't get me, I got a hybrid. I do it because it gets me fuel consumption. I filled it up. I had probably 3/4 of a tank before I took off for LA. I topped it off for $15, despite being over $5 a gallon up here. But that gave me 535 miles. I got down to California. I still had over 200 miles, just under 200 miles. And then I topped it off yesterday for about $55, and I'm back and I still have a half a tank. So, but yeah, I mean, that should definitely be in there. And I'd like to leave you with these thoughts. California is building the largest battery in the world near San Francisco. This I didn't even know about till I read this. They intend to power it from solar panels and windmills. They claim that this is the ultimate in being green. Somehow Kermit the Frog just came into my head. But let me tell you something. This construction project is creating an environmental disaster. All right, so let me tell you why. The main problem with solar arrays is the chemicals that are needed to process the silicate into the silicone that's used in the panels. To make pure enough silicone requires processing with, this is where I'm going to get these chemicals all kind of screwed up, so bear with me. We'll pop them up maybe on the board here. So when you're processing the silicone, it requires hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, nitric acid, hydrogen fluoride, trichloroethane, acetone. In addition, they also need gallium, arsenide, copper, indium, gallium, diselenide, cadmium telluride, and that's also highly toxic. Wow, I got right through that when I have the really bad ones are coming up. The silicone dust is a hazard to the workers. The panels can't be recycled. Windmills are the ultimate, and we just talked about embedded costs and environmental destruction. Each one of them, and I was shocked when I saw this, and I know before the show I was talking to Victor about this. Were you shocked at the weight of these things?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, you know what? Not really, because my one of my really close friends is a head mechanic at Tesla in California. So we talk about it. We've talked about it before, about these batteries, and it was more of like, yo, these things are 1,000 pounds, man. I'm under this thing can fall and crush me when I'm installing a battery, But
well, I had when I had read the article. I'd read this before I drove down, and I remembered seeing all the windmills in California, and I started looking at them a little closer this time. And you can tell those are some heavy beasts. Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell you exactly how heavy they are, just so you know. All right. So each one of the windmills, they weigh 1,688 tons. We're not talking about the little teeny weeny windmills that people will put out on their personal property. We're talking about the big giant industrial windmills that they think is the answer to going green. All right. So each one of them weighs 1,688 tons, or the equivalent of 23 houses. Contains 1,300 tons of concrete, 295 tons of steel, 48 tons of iron, 24 tons of fiberglass, and the very hard to extract rare earths, neodymium, praseodymium, and dysprosium. I probably butchered those names, but I wasn't going to sit here and try to figure out how to pronounce them. Each blade, 81,000 pounds. It'll last 15 to 20 years, at which time it's got to be replaced. As I said, you can't recycle the blades. Sadly, both solar and windmill kills birds, bats, sea life, migratory insects. I've heard that the solar panels out there, as you cross over into California, there's a huge solar farm out there. I've heard, and I don't know, maybe the birds have finally realized don't fly over that thing. I heard when that was first out there, I heard birds were just falling out of the sky because they were, if you've ever put a magnifying glass on an ant or other insect or something and fried it, that's what was happening to birds and insects flying over solar panels. So these may be, or there may be a place at some point for these technologies, but you got to look beyond the myth of zero emissions. Victor, final thoughts?
I feel like there's never any final thoughts. It's like
It's an ongoing thing.
it's an ongoing thing, and I'm an optimistic person in the sense that I think that things will get better because social media and like what we're doing here, just talking and being able to have these conversations. Like they can't cancel us. Like they can't cancel me. I can say whatever I want. My business isn't dependent on them. Just like your.
But they're
business isn't
trying.
dependent.
Cancel culture.
They're trying, but it's
trying.
like these things need to be said and they need to be talked about and they need to be talked about in an open manner. They need to be talked about in a respectable manner, like adults, and not throw these insults and these things and the fact that like you look at the past 5 years, 10 years, 8 years of our well, let's say after Obama. Even before Obama, but Obama was kind of to my point, everybody's
he stirred the pot an awful lot.
No, but what my point is that everybody's over 70 years old.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here? Like, Nancy Pelosi gave a toast to Joe Biden the other day. She's like a bat. Like, what are we doing here? Why is she the Speaker of the House? Why are
any of them there?
Why is Joe Biden, who is senile,
Yeah.
how is he the president? And I hate the argument of the fact that, oh, he's just a puppet. So you're telling me you would rather have some unknown force that you did not vote for, you don't know their names, you don't know their face,
you
run
have
it,
no idea who you voted
versus this person who tells you exactly
And
what they are.
you knew that they were stealing. You got to know they were
Stop
stealing.
hiding behind ignorance. Like, ignorance is bliss until it slaps you in the face, and then it hurts.
Well, and it's and I think I told you the story, and I alluded to it that I hope that the woke crowd that was so incensed with Orange Mad, he's bad, got to get rid of Trump. Oh, mean tweet. I'd rather put up with a couple of mean tweets than have the world on fire over in Europe, be paying $6, $7, $8, $9 for a gallon of gas. What the hell is a loaf of bread going to cost?
Yeah.
A couple of mean tweets here or there. I mean, he got the job done.
In a perfect world, we'll have Trump policies without Trump's demeanor.
That would have been fine, but you know what? We needed
to not be polarizing.
We needed the comedic relief.
We did for the thick-skinned people, for the people who don't really care about stupid things like that. I was raised off of, I think I was the last generation of this. I was raised off of sticks and stones may break my bones, but words would never hurt me.
Exactly.
Now people equate words with violence, and what that means is that if I say something you don't like, it's violence. That means you're hurting me. That means I can now hurt you.
Yeah. Well, and
that's
a dangerous road to go down.
It's
Very
a dangerous
dangerous.
road to go down.
Especially when you got somebody that's thin-skinned like that gets their feelings hurt over something that somebody said, and then they go and they grab a gun and they decide to shoot people and kill them, which is probably what happened yesterday in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on that bus on Broward Boulevard. Thank God it was right in front of the police station, and that bus driver, she drove I guess she drove over the median, cross traffic, hit 3 cars, and pulled up right in front of the police station. As this guy shot 4 people on the bus. 2 of them died. And then he got off the bus. And they later found the weapon, and he got off the bus and surrendered. And he's been charged with 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. So his life is over with. 36-year-old, that just scum of the earth. Sorry, but I mean, what could have happened? First of all, why are you carrying a gun on a city bus? Second of all, how do you get into an argument that's that serious that you're going to just start blowing people away? Yeah. People are idiots. We got to stop the madness. I think, how are we looking for time?
Hour 15.
Wow.
Pretty long.
Yeah. You know what? I think we'll wrap this up. We can come back next week. And next week, we're going to pick up with the 57 members of Congress.
Yeah.
That little bit of financial troubles, really, in my opinion. And here's the teaser. These are 57 members of Congress that have violated a law that was designed to stop insider trading and prevent conflicts of interest. We'll pick up with that next week, right here on the Brad Michaels Show. Victor, one last thing or anything to add? Or
no, we'll be back next week. Stay tuned.
Right. See you next week. Thanks for watching. I'm Brad Michaels.